the greatest spectacle of World War II. This article will tell the story of the most extensive and successful strategic deception operation in history, Operation Fortitude. You will learn how, with the help of inflatable tanks, wooden cannons, and a ghost army, the Allies convinced Hitler of a non-existent threat and changed the course of the war. This is a story of how cunning and imagination proved stronger than steel. Section 1. The problem codenamed Normandy, late 1943, January 1944. By the end of 1943, the plan for the landing in Normandy, codenamed Operation Overlord, had been officially approved and finalized by the Allied command. This monumental decision marked a critical turning point in the strategic planning of the European theater of World War II. The objective was clear: a large-scale amphibious invasion of mainland Europe to establish a foothold and begin the liberation of Nazi-occupied territories. However, the approval of Overlord immediately brought to light a significant and perilous strategic dilemma that threatened the entire operation's success. This dilemma revolved around the location of the German forces, particularly the formidable 15th Army of the Wehrmacht. The 15th Army was recognized by Allied intelligence as the most powerful and well-equipped German military grouping in Western Europe at the time. Its strategic positioning was not accidental. It was stationed in the Pas-de-Calais region of France. From a purely geographical and logistical standpoint, Pas-de-Calais presented itself as the most logical and anticipated location for any major Allied invasion. The shortest distance across the English Channel, combined with relatively suitable landing beaches and a direct route to vital industrial centers in Germany, made it the prime candidate for an invasion point in the eyes of both the German high command and conventional military strategy. The Germans had heavily fortified this area, establishing extensive defensive lines, artillery emplacements, and troop concentrations, all predicated on their firm belief that Pas-de-Calais would be the primary target. The German certainty regarding Pas-de-Calais was not merely theoretical. It was backed by tangible actions and significant investments in defensive infrastructure. A little-known but telling fact from this period illustrates the depth of their conviction. German engineering troops were actively conducting intensive training exercises specifically focused on the deliberate flooding of coastal lowlands within the Pas-de-Calais region. This elaborate defensive measure was designed to render any amphibious landing in that area virtually impossible, transforming the coastal plains into impassable quagmires for invading forces. This extensive preparation underscored the Germans' unwavering belief in the Pas-de-Calais scenario and their commitment to thwarting an invasion there. This German certainty, while a challenge, also presented a unique opportunity for the Allies. The strategic interpretation of this situation was clear. The Allies needed to do more than just conceal the actual location of the landing in Normandy. Simply keeping the secret was not enough. They had to actively and convincingly persuade the enemy that the invasion would, in fact, occur elsewhere, specifically in Pas-de-Calais. This necessity gave birth to the revolutionary concept of a deception plan, a comprehensive strategy of misdirection designed to manipulate enemy perceptions and actions. It was an ambitious undertaking, moving beyond simple secrecy to active, large-scale psychological warfare. This profound realization about the necessity of deception laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most elaborate and successful military hoaxes in history. It was a recognition that, in modern warfare, the battlefield extended beyond physical combat to the realm of information and perception. The goal was to create an illusion so potent that it would draw the formidable German defenses away from the true target, thus creating a window of vulnerability for the real invasion. As Winston Churchill famously observed, encapsulating the very essence of this strategic approach, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." Operation Fortitude, conceived from this critical juncture of late 1943 and early 1944, became the ultimate embodiment of this principle. It was a testament to the idea that, sometimes, The most effective weapon in war is not brute force, but calculated deception and a carefully constructed tapestry of falsehoods, designed to mislead and paralyze the enemy. The stage was set for a grand illusion that would determine the fate of nations. Section 2. The Birth of the Ghost Army, Operation Fortitude, February-March 1944. With the strategic dilemma of Normandy clearly defined and the imperative for a grand deception firmly established by early 1944, the Allies officially launched Operation Fortitude. This operation was not a singular, monolithic plan but rather a carefully bifurcated strategy, designed to create two distinct, yet equally convincing phantom threats. These were Fortitude North and Fortitude South, each crafted to exploit existing German anxieties and strategic assumptions. Fortitude North aimed to simulate an imminent invasion of Norway, a historically sensitive area for Hitler, who harbored a deep-seated fear of an Allied thrust into Scandinavia. Fortitude South, however, was the linchpin of the overall deception, meticulously designed to reinforce the German belief that the primary invasion would target Pas-de-Calais, thereby diverting critical resources and attention away from the real landing zones in Normandy. For Fortitude South, the architects of deception created a formidable, albeit entirely illusory, fighting force: the 1st U.S. Army Group, or FUSAG. This phantom army group was presented as the spearhead of the supposed Pas-de-Calais invasion. Its existence was meticulously fabricated, extending to every conceivable detail that would lend it an air of authenticity. While FUSAG did incorporate some real divisions, actual units stationed in Britain that were deliberately positioned to appear as if they were part of this larger, fictitious formation, the bulk of its strength was composed of entirely non-existent parts. These included fabricated corps, divisions, and regiments, complete with invented unit numbers, distinctive, and often elaborately designed, divisional emblems, and even detailed organizational structures. These intricate inventions were the brainchild of highly specialized British experts from the London Controlling Section, LCS, and MI5's Deception Sections, who painstakingly crafted every aspect of this ghost army to be utterly convincing to German aerial reconnaissance, radio intercepts, and intelligence reports. A lesser-known but crucial aspect of FUSAG's composition was the meticulous attention paid to simulating its logistical footprint. For instance, the Phantom divisions were assigned specific assembly areas in southeastern England, opposite Pas-de-Calais. These areas were then filled with thousands of inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces, manufactured from rubber and canvas, along with wooden replicas of various military equipment. False camps were established, complete with dummy barracks, supply depots, and vehicle parks. Even the seemingly mundane details were addressed. For example, engineers would drag heavy logs behind trucks to create convincing tank tracks in the soft ground, implying the presence of genuine armored formations. These visual cues were supplemented by fabricated radio traffic, designed to mimic the normal communications patterns of a large army preparing for invasion. The success of FUSAG as a deception hinged not only on its visual and auditory manifestations but also crucially on its ostensible leadership. The Allies understood the immense psychological impact that certain commanders had on enemy perceptions. Thus, the choice of the main actor for this grand performance was a stroke of genius: General George S. Patton. Patton was, without question, one of the most recognized and feared Allied commanders by the German High Command. His aggressive tactics, dynamic personality, and previous successes in North Africa and Sicily had cemented his reputation as a formidable and relentless opponent. German intelligence sources, including intercepted communications and interrogations of prisoners, consistently rated Patton as among the best, if not the very best, of the Allied generals. However, at this specific juncture, Patton found himself in a peculiar position. He was in temporary disfavor with the Allied command after a highly publicized scandal involving him slapping shell-shocked soldiers in Sicily. This incident had relegated him to a less prominent role, seemingly out of the main operational picture. This perceived marginalization, ironically, made him the perfect candidate for the Fusag deception. His appointment as the head of a supposedly critical invasion force in Pas-de-Calais was a brilliant strategic move. It lent immediate credibility to Fusag's threat. The Germans, believing Patton to be a commander who would only be entrusted with the most vital and decisive operations, would naturally conclude that any force under his command represented the true main effort. Patton, despite his initial frustration at being sidelined from active combat command, embraced his new role with characteristic gusto and enthusiasm. He understood the immense strategic importance of his assignment. He actively played his part, making well-publicized appearances at various Fusag headquarters in southeastern England, inspecting dummy troops and equipment, and making loud, often boastful statements that were carefully leaked or intended to be overheard by double agents. These deliberate public displays were designed to solidify the German belief that he was indeed preparing to lead a massive invasion force across the Channel. His very presence, amplified by carefully managed intelligence leaks, was a powerful psychological weapon. There was even an anecdote circulating among Allied circles at the time, reflecting Patton's unique personality and his somewhat unconventional role in the deception. The story goes that Patton, known for his bluntness and disdain for anything less than direct action, grumbled about his assignment, perhaps with a wry smile. "They gave me command of an army of ghosts to scare another ghost," referring to Hitler and the phantom threat he was supposed to embody. This anecdote, whether entirely true or embellished, perfectly captures the paradoxical nature of Patton's involvement and the imaginative spirit of Operation Fortitude. His participation transformed a purely illusory threat into something palpably real in the minds of the German military leaders, effectively leveraging his formidable reputation to create a strategic mirage of unparalleled scale and effectiveness. The stage was now set, and the principal actor was in place, ready to command his army of phantoms. Section 3 of Wood and Air. The Craft of Deception, April-May 1944. As spring bloomed in 1944, the coastal regions of southeastern England, particularly those directly opposite the Pas-de-Calais, began to teem with what appeared to be an unprecedented military buildup. This was not a random occurrence, but the meticulously orchestrated physical manifestation of Operation Fortitude. The objective was to create an overwhelming visual spectacle, a grand illusion designed to be utterly convincing to German aerial reconnaissance flights and any ground-level intelligence gathering. The scale of this deception was immense, involving thousands of fabricated pieces of military hardware, all strategically placed and maintained to project an image of a massive invasion force poised for action. The materialization of this phantom army relied heavily on ingenuity and a surprisingly simple range of materials. Foremost among these were inflatable mock-ups. Thousands of Sherman tanks, the iconic American medium tank, were crafted from lightweight rubber and canvas. These could be quickly inflated using compressed air, transforming them from flat, easily transportable bundles into seemingly formidable armored vehicles. Similarly, inflatable Chrysler trucks and various types of aircraft were deployed, adding to the visual density of the simulated military presence. These inflatable models were remarkably effective from a distance or at altitude, appearing as genuine equipment to the lenses of German reconnaissance cameras. They allowed for rapid deployment and redeployment, enabling the deception teams to create the impression of shifting troop concentrations and logistical movements. In addition to the inflatable armada, more detailed wooden mock-ups were employed, particularly for artillery pieces and tanks where a higher degree of realism was required for closer scrutiny or specific photographic angles. These wooden replicas, often constructed with remarkable attention to detail, simulated the appearance of genuine heavy artillery guns and various armored vehicles. They were sturdier than their inflatable counterparts and could withstand more detailed observation, further bolstering the illusion of a tangible, powerful force. The combination of lightweight, easily deployable inflatables and more robust wooden models created a versatile and convincing array of phantom equipment. However, the illusion extended far beyond mere placement of mock-ups. The deception teams understood that realism demanded more than just static displays of equipment. A little-known but critical aspect of their craft involved simulating the signs of active military presence and daily routines. For instance, to create the impression of heavy vehicle traffic and the movement of armored columns, sappers were tasked with an ingenious detail. They would drag large logs behind trucks. This simple act mimicked the distinctive tracks left by tank treads on soft ground, adding a layer of authenticity to the assembly areas. The ground, therefore, did not just hold static vehicles but bore the evidence of recent, substantial military activity. Furthermore, the deception extended to simulating the mundane yet essential activities of a bustling military encampment. Near the mock-ups, deception personnel would deliberately light small fires, the smoke from which would be visible from the air, suggesting cooking or heating. Laundry lines were set up, adorned with soldiers' uniforms and personal items, creating a tableau of human presence and activity. Empty tin cans and other refuse, typical of a large army camp, were scattered around the sites. These seemingly minor details were crucial. They were not attempts to hide the equipment, but rather to make the phantom presence utterly convincing to any intelligence analyst examining aerial photographs or reports from double agents. The goal was to create a scene that screamed active military camp to an observer seeking such confirmation. This entire elaborate production was not about concealment, but about blatant display. It was a grand theatrical performance explicitly staged for the benefit of German aerial reconnaissance. The mock-ups and fabricated infrastructure were intentionally placed in visible locations, often in open fields or clearings, where they could be easily spotted by Luftwaffe planes on photographic missions. However, a crucial caveat applied. These highly visible sites were invariably situated within zones of strictly limited ground access. This restriction served a dual purpose. It protected the deception from accidental discovery by local civilians or, more importantly, from direct verification by any German spies who might have infiltrated the area. By controlling ground access, the Allies ensured that the illusion remained intact, preventing any close inspection that would expose the ruse. The visual evidence from the air would confirm the presence of the army, while the lack of ground access prevented its exposure as a sham. The meticulousness of this deception even gave rise to anecdotal stories that circulated among the local population and military personnel. One such tale, illustrative of the detailed effort put into making the illusions seem real, involved a farmer who reportedly complained to military authorities that his sheep were refusing to graze near a newly appeared tank. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the inflatable Sherman mock-up, Catch the Wind, was gently swaying and shifting, inadvertently frightening the animals. This story, whether entirely factual or apocryphal, highlights the extent to which the visual and environmental details were considered, even if sometimes with unintended consequences. It underscored how effectively these wooden tanks and air-filled trucks were designed to mimic their genuine counterparts, fooling not only enemy intelligence but occasionally even the local wildlife. The craft of deception in Operation Fortitude was an art form, painstakingly executed with both grand gestures and subtle touches, all designed to construct an unshakable belief in a threat that was never truly there. Section 4. The Ether War. Lies They Longed to Hear, May-June 1944. While the physical manifestation of the Phantom Army, with its inflatable tanks and wooden guns, created a compelling visual deception, the true nervous system of Operation Fortitude lay in the unseen realm of radio waves and secret agents. This was the Ether War, a sophisticated and multi-layered campaign of strategic disinformation that worked in tandem with the visual cues to manipulate German intelligence at its core. The success of this phase hinged on the ability to not just transmit false information, but to ensure that this information was received, believed, and acted upon by the German High Command. At the heart of this intricate web of espionage and counter-espionage was a masterstroke by British counterintelligence, specifically MI5. Before the planning for D-Day escalated, MI5 had systematically identified, located, and, crucially, turned every single German agent operating within Great Britain. This extraordinary achievement meant that every German spy known to be transmitting intelligence from British soil was, in fact, working for the Allies. This highly effective system was known by the codename double-cross system, sometimes referred to as the XX system. Instead of eliminating these enemy agents, the British exploited them. Each agent was carefully managed and, under strict Allied control, began transmitting specially prepared disinformation messages back to their German handlers in Berlin. These messages were meticulously crafted to reinforce the narrative of Operation Fortitude, painting a consistent and credible picture of an invasion force gathering in southeastern England, poised to strike Pas-de-Calais. The brilliance of the double-cross system lay in its complete control over the information flow. The Germans were receiving intelligence from sources they believed to be their own, thereby lending immense credibility to the fabrications. The agents' reports were often interwoven with genuine, innocuous details to enhance their believability, making the critical pieces of disinformation appear to be part of a larger, authentic intelligence mosaic. Among the pantheon of double agents, one figure stood out as exceptionally valuable and incredibly imaginative: Garbo. Born Juan Pujol Garcia, Garbo was a Spanish national who, driven by an intense dislike for Nazi Germany, initially attempted to offer his services to the British, who initially rejected him. Undeterred, he managed to get himself recruited by the Germans, establishing a fictitious network of subagents and feeding them fabricated intelligence from Lisbon. Once the British realized his unique value, they brought him to London and fully integrated him into the double-cross system. Garbo was a master of his craft. He created and managed an astonishing network of 27 entirely fictitious subagents, each with a unique backstory, personality, and area of operation within Britain. He would then meticulously report on the observations and discoveries of these non-existent individuals, sending a constant stream of detailed, seemingly credible intelligence back to his German handlers. The Germans, utterly convinced of his loyalty and the breadth of his network, not only paid him substantial sums of money but also bestowed upon him their highest trust. They genuinely believed they had a vital and extensive intelligence pipeline directly into the heart of Britain. The detail in Garbo's reports was so convincing that he even fabricated illnesses and deaths for his subagents when their usefulness ran its course or their information needed to be explained away. A particularly vivid and pivotal moment in Garbo's operational history occurred on the night of June 5 to 6, 1944, as the real Allied invasion fleet was making its way across the English Channel towards the beaches of Normandy. Garbo transmitted a seemingly panicked and urgent message to his German contacts. His report declared, "The landing in Normandy is merely a diversion. The real, decisive blow will be launched against Pas-de-Calais." This message was not sent immediately as the invasion began. Crucially, Garbo deliberately delayed its transmission. This timing was a calculated risk. He understood that sending the message too early might alert the Germans to the true invasion and jeopardize the D-Day landings. By transmitting it after the initial wave of troops had already hit the beaches and the battle for Normandy was undeniably underway, his message served a different, yet equally vital, purpose. Rather than preventing the invasion, it reinforced the existing German misconception. When Hitler and his high command received Garbo's desperate warning after the initial reports from Normandy, it did not contradict their long-held belief. Instead, it solidified it. They interpreted the Normandy landings not as the main event, but precisely as Garbo reported a clever, but ultimately secondary, diversion designed to draw attention away from the real target Pas-de-Calais. This brilliant piece of timing and misdirection cemented Hitler's conviction that the main attack was still to come, thus preventing him from committing crucial reserves to the Normandy front in the critical early hours and days. The Ether War was a testament to the power of psychological manipulation in warfare. Through the double-cross system, and particularly through the masterful performance of agents like Garbo, the Allies didn't just transmit lies. They transmitted lies that the Germans, due to their pre-existing biases and strategic assumptions, were eager and prepared to believe. This created a powerful feedback loop where German intelligence, believing it was confirming its own analysis, inadvertently confirmed the Allied deception. This intricate radio game and the unwavering loyalty of the turned double agents became the invisible, yet indispensable, central nervous system of Operation Fortitude, ensuring that the Ghost Army had not only a physical presence but also a convincing voice in the enemy's ear. Section 5. The night when ghosts attacked, June 5 to 6, 1944. The culmination of Operation Fortitude, the moment of its most critical test, arrived on the night of June 5 to 6, 1944. As the vast, genuine Allied invasion fleet embarked on its perilous journey across the English Channel towards the beaches of Normandy, a parallel, entirely illusory invasion was simultaneously being launched. This was the night when the Ghost Army, meticulously constructed from wood, air, and cunning, made its attack on Pas-de-Calais, creating a final, paralyzing layer of confusion and doubt in the minds of the German High Command. While the real armada, comprising thousands of ships and landing craft, steamed silently towards the Norman coast, a much smaller, dedicated group of Allied ships and aircraft was engaged in a sophisticated deception operation aimed directly at Pas-de-Calais. This force, far from being a genuine invasion fleet, was tasked with creating the unmistakable electronic and visual signature of one. These vessels and planes deployed a range of counter-radar technologies and electronic countermeasures. They used advanced jamming equipment to flood German radar screens with static and false signals, masking their true numbers and positions. Critically, they also deployed vast quantities of window chaff, strips of metallic foil dropped from aircraft, which, on German radar screens, appeared as the radar returns from hundreds, if not thousands, of additional aircraft and ships. The combined effect of these measures was designed to paint a terrifyingly convincing picture on German radar scopes. That of an enormous invasion armada, comparable in scale to the real one, bearing down on the Pas-de-Calais. This was not a subtle feint. It was a bold, in-your-face electronic assault designed to overwhelm German defensive systems and convince them that the main invasion was precisely where they had always expected it to be. The Phantom Fleet steamed towards Calais, creating a compelling visual and electronic ghost image that screamed invasion to the German coastal defenses and radar operators. This meticulously orchestrated dual offensive represented a double strike against German strategic clarity. On one hand, there was the genuine and devastating invasion unfolding in Normandy, a fact that could not be denied as reports of landings began to trickle in. On the other hand, there was the equally convincing, from an intelligence perspective, virtual invasion bearing down on Pas-de-Calais, reinforced by Garbo's last-minute, desperate warnings and the sustained efforts of the physical deception in southeastern England. The German High Command found itself in a state of complete strategic paralysis. They were confronted with two seemingly equally credible threats, and they simply could not discern which was the genuine main effort and which was the diversion. This paralysis was precisely the goal of Fortitude. The Germans had limited reserves and needed to commit them decisively to the primary battle. But which was the primary battle? The confusion was profound. Even after receiving confirmed reports of landings in Normandy, the ingrained belief in Pas-de-Calais, meticulously cultivated by Fortitude, prevented an immediate and overwhelming response. German commanders debated whether the Normandy landings were merely a preliminary probe, a diversionary tactic to draw attention away from the real target. The impact of this deception on the highest levels of German command was profound. A telling illustration comes from the actions of two of Germany's most critical military figures. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of Army Group B, responsible for defending the French coast, was not at his headquarters in France on D-Day. He was in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday, confident that any Allied invasion was still weeks or even months away, and certainly not imminent in Normandy. His absence was a direct consequence of the widespread German belief, largely fostered by Fortitude, that no major invasion was coming immediately, or that if it did, it would be elsewhere. Even more critically, Adolf Hitler himself famously slept through the initial critical hours of the D-Day invasion. He had retired for the night with strict instructions not to be disturbed, confident that any early reports of landings would be merely a feint. When he was finally awakened, hours after the first Allied troops had landed, his initial reaction, heavily influenced by the constant stream of Fortitude disinformation and his own deeply entrenched preconceptions, was that the Normandy landings were indeed a diversionary maneuver. This conviction, which stemmed directly from the success of Fortitude, prevented him from immediately releasing crucial armored reserves, particularly the powerful Panzer Lehr Division and others positioned further inland, which could have been instrumental in pushing the Allies back into the sea. By the time Hitler was convinced that Normandy was the main attack and finally released these reserves, precious hours, which stretched into critical days, had been lost. As Rommel later lamented, in a statement that tragically underscored the success of Fortitude, "Once the landing has taken place, we must be sure that it is not a deception." But by that pivotal morning of June 6, 1944, and in the critical days that followed, it was already too late. The deception had worked perfectly. The ghost attack on Pas-de-Calais, alongside the real one in Normandy, achieved its aim. It sowed chaos, confusion, and paralysis in the German high command, buying the real invasion forces the invaluable time they needed to establish their foothold and begin the monumental task of liberating Europe. Section 6. The Legacy of Wooden Tanks. Victory achieved by cunning. The immediate aftermath of D-Day and the subsequent weeks proved to be the ultimate validation of Operation Fortitude. The intricate web of deception, woven from inflatable tanks, dummy airfields, fabricated radio traffic, and the cunning reports of double agents, held firm long after the actual Allied invasion had commenced. The most critical outcome of this sustained illusion was the strategic paralysis it inflicted upon the German high command, buying the Allied forces in Normandy invaluable time to consolidate their fragile beachhead. For a critically important period of 7 weeks following D-Day, the powerful German 15th Army remained steadfastly stationed in the Pas-de-Calais region. This formidable force, comprising some of the Wehrmacht's best divisions and the most robust defensive fortifications, continued to await the non-existent invasion by General Patton's Phantom Army. Their unwavering vigil in the face of mounting evidence of a real and sustained invasion elsewhere speaks volumes about the penetrative success of Operation Fortitude. This prolonged wait was not accidental. It was the direct, intended consequence of the Allied deception, which had so thoroughly convinced Hitler and his top generals that the Normandy landings were merely a diversion. The strategic dogma that Pas-de-Calais was the most logical invasion point, reinforced by years of German defensive planning and meticulously fed disinformation, proved incredibly difficult to dislodge. A particularly telling and little-known fact highlights just how effective this deception remained. Even 2 full weeks after the momentous landings in Normandy on June 6, German command continued to maintain more divisions in the Pas-de-Calais area than they had committed to the actual, fiercely contested front in Normandy. This staggering misallocation of resources at a critical juncture of the war underscores the profound impact of fortitude. While Allied soldiers were fighting tooth and nail to expand their lodgment in Normandy, often against heavy resistance, a significant portion of Germany's defensive strength was held in reserve, staring across the Channel at a ghost. This allowed the Allied forces to expand their beachhead, bring in more troops and supplies, and begin the arduous breakout from the Norman hedgerows without facing the full, concentrated might of the German defenses. The strategic interpretation of this outcome is unequivocal. Operation Fortitude saved an immeasurable number of Allied lives. The initial phases of an amphibious invasion are always the most vulnerable, with high casualties expected as landing forces establish a foothold against fortified defenses. By diverting the bulk of German reserves and keeping the powerful 15th Army out of the fight in Normandy for those crucial weeks, Fortitude significantly reduced the opposition faced by the invading forces. It is not an exaggeration to say that the success of the deception likely spared tens, if not hundreds of thousands, of Allied soldiers from death or injury. Beyond the immediate tactical and strategic benefits, Operation Fortitude offered a profound lesson for future military engagements and the study of warfare itself. It unequivocally demonstrated that informational warfare and strategic deception could be a decisive factor on the battlefield, sometimes even more potent than conventional military might. The ability to manipulate an enemy's perception, to control their understanding of reality, proved to be an incredibly powerful weapon. Fortitude illustrated that the minds of military leaders, their ingrained assumptions, and their intelligence apparatus could be targeted and exploited as effectively as any physical objective. It highlighted the importance of intelligence, not just for gathering information, but for actively shaping the intelligence received by the enemy. The enduring legacy of wooden tanks and inflatable guns lies in their unexpected power. They did not fire a single shot or engage in direct combat. They did not conquer territory in the traditional sense. Instead, they won something far more valuable in the context of the D-Day invasion: time. The time gained for the Allied forces to secure their position in Normandy, to build up their strength, and to prepare for the breakout was absolutely critical to the success of the entire Western Front campaign. Operation Fortitude stands as one of the most brilliant, creative, and successful military tricks of all time, a testament to the idea that ingenuity and psychological warfare can, indeed, prove mightier than steel and brute force in changing the course of history. It remains a compelling example of how a well-executed deception plan can profoundly influence the outcome of a major conflict, proving that sometimes the greatest victories are won not with overwhelming power, but with superior cunning.